The boarding area buzzed with the usual airport chaos announcements echoing through tinny speakers. Phones ringing, rolling suitcases clattering across polished floors. But inside the first-class cabin of Southwest Flight 2847, a strange silence had settled. You could feel it thick, uneasy, electric. "Captain Morrison, we need you up front now." The voice over the intercom was tight, urgent. Jessica, the senior flight attendant, sounded panicked, and instantly, 147 passengers looked up from their phones. Something was wrong, very wrong. Up in seat 2A sat a man who hadn't moved in 12 minutes. Not when Jessica asked to see his ID again. Not when she accused him of being in the wrong seat. Not even when she called him a fraud in front of a cabin full of people. He just sat there calmly scrolling through his phone, occasionally glancing at his watch. Marcus Williams didn't need to argue. He didn't need to raise his voice. He just waited. And that made Jessica even more nervous. "Sir, you're holding up this entire flight," she snapped, trying to sound firm even as her voice shook. "The captain is coming." Marcus finally looked up, meeting her gaze. His tone was measured, his expression unreadable. "I know," he said simply. Then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed. A text from legal team. "Everything ready, sir. Just give us the word." Jessica didn't see it, but if she had, she might have realized this was no ordinary passenger. The stories we tell ourselves, every person on that plane thought they knew what was happening to them. Marcus looked out of place, a man in a tailored charcoal suit, sitting too quietly, too confidently. Jessica saw a threat. Passengers saw a scene. But the truth was more complicated than any of them could imagine. Because the stories we tell ourselves about strangers can be the ones that destroy us. The captain, or Vice Captain Derek Morrison, appeared in the aisle like a storm cloud, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, gold stripes glinting on his uniform sleeves. 23 years of flying had taught him one lesson above all else. Problem passengers must be handled decisively. He approached with the authority of a man who expected to be obeyed. "Jessica, what's going on here?" he asked, his voice even but heavy. Jessica pointed, her face pale. "This man has been sitting in first class for 20 minutes. He won't show proper ID. He's been aggressive." Morrison turned his attention to Marcus. Expensive suit. Calm posture. Hands folded neatly. Nothing about him screamed aggressive. Still, Jessica's voice trembled, and Morrison had trusted her judgment for years. "Sir," Morrison said, "I understand there's been some confusion about your seat assignment." Without a word, Marcus lifted his boarding pass. "Southwest Flight 2847. Seat 2A. Morrison examined it. The details looked legitimate. Nothing was off. "This appears to be in order," he said slowly. Jessica leaned closer and whispered. But the whole cabin heard it. "It's fake. Look at him, Captain. Really look. Does he belong in first class?" A few passengers gasped. One teenager in row 4 started filming. A travel vlogger named Emma Morgan went live on her phone. Her stream title flashing, "Racist Flight Attendant." Within seconds, 8,000 viewers were watching. The weight of the cabin. Morrison could feel it, the tension, the eyes, the cameras. The businessman in one seat tapped his watch impatiently. The couple in to see whispered nervously. Someone coughed, too loud in the quiet. "Ma'am," Morrison said carefully. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Jessica hesitated, then said the thing she should never have said. "You know what I mean. People like him don't usually fly first class." There it was. The sentence that would soon circle the globe. Marcus finally spoke, his voice soft but cutting. "People like me, Ms. Martinez?" Jessica flushed. "Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. One see hundreds of passengers every day. I know who belongs where." Emma's phone shook in her hand as the live chat exploded. Did she really just say that? "This is insane. Southwest is done. Hashtag Southwest discrimination." Double quotes. The calm before the fire. Morrison rubbed the back of his neck. He could feel the spiraling. "Sir," he said to Marcus, "I'll need to see additional identification. A driver's license, maybe a card, anything to verify your ticket." Marcus sighed softly, reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet. Morrison tensed, instinctively, training kicking in. But Marcus's movements were slow, deliberate, non-threatening. He opened the wallet. Inside gleamed a black American Express Centurion card, the kind reserved for the ultra-wealthy. Morrison's jaw tightened. He'd only ever seen one of those in a magazine. "That's a very exclusive card," he said quietly. "Yes," Marcus replied evenly. "It is." Jessica crossed her arms. "That still doesn't explain how you got this seat. First class costs $800. You probably used miles or some upgrade trick." Marcus looked at her calmly. "I paid full price. At exactly 6:43 this morning." The precision in his tone made Morrison uneasy. Nobody remembered the exact time they bought a ticket. Nobody. Except someone making a point. The crowd turns 9 minutes to departure. Passengers were whispering now. Phones recording. Captain, Jessica urged other passengers are complaining. We can't delay takeoff. They pay good money for this experience. He's making everyone uncomfortable. And that was all it took, sir, Morrison said. I'm going to ask you to deplane voluntarily. We can sort this out at the gate. No. The single word cut through the cabin like a blade. Morrison blinked. I beg your pardon. I said no. Captain Morrison. I'm not deplaning. I'm not moving. I'm staying in my assigned seat until this aircraft reaches Phoenix. Jessica's face reddened. That's it, I'm calling security. Jessica, Morrison ordered, make the call. He'd made up his mind. This was a standoff now. Marcus glanced at his watch again, an elegant Patek Philippe, gleaming under the cabin lights. Then he asked, almost casually, Captain, before you do that, are you familiar with Federal Aviation Regulation 91.11? Morrison froze. That was oddly specific. That section covers crew authority during flight operations, he said. Are you threatening legal action? I'm asking, Marcus replied. If you understand the legal framework you're currently operating under. The internet Iripsima's live stream soared past 30,000 viewers. The comments flew faster than she could read them. This is 2024 and we're still doing this? Get this racist crew fired. Tag CNN, this needs coverage. Morrison's radio crackled. Captain, ground security boarding in 2 minutes for passenger removal. Copy. He said mechanically. But something about Marcus's tone had planted a seed of doubt. Marcus looked up. Voice low and steady. Captain, before those officers arrive, I think you should know something. Morrison frowned. And what's that? This conversation is being recorded by at least 12 devices. Your crew member has made statements that can be construed as discriminatory under federal law. And in about 30 seconds, he glanced at his watch. You're going to receive a call that will change everything. Morrison's stomach dropped. What kind of call? Marcus smiled faintly. The kind that ends careers, Captain. The kind that makes headlines. The kind that changes companies. As if on cue, Morrison's phone buzzed. Incoming call. Southwest operations, urgent. Marcus leaned back, hands folded. You might want to answer that, asterisk the call that changed everything, Captain Morrison. A voice snapped through the line. This is Southwest operations. We're monitoring social media. You've got 42,000 live viewers. Handle this quietly and quickly. Morrison's pulse hammered in his chest. 42,000 people were watching his next move. Jessica hovered behind him, trembling. The other passengers stared, wide-eyed. As the security officers Jana Kim and Mike Rodriguez boarded the plane, what's the situation? Kim asked. Jessica pointed at Marcus with a shaking hand. He's been disruptive for 30 minutes, threatening the crew, refusing to move to economy where he belongs. Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. His eyes just tracked every motion, every witness. Kim stepped forward. Sir, we need you to come with us voluntarily. I'm sitting in my assigned seat with a valid boarding pass, Marcus said calmly. I'm not going anywhere. Rodriguez's hand went to his restraints. Sir, you're interfering with flight operations. That's a federal offense. 6 minutes to departure, the gate agent announced over the intercom. Emma's live chat exploded. Sue them all. Call every news station. Make this viral. The businessman in one seat groaned. Captain, I paid for peace and quiet, not this circus. The woman in 2D held her phone higher, making sure the entire internet got a perfect shot of the unfolding disaster. Marcus exhaled slowly. Officers, before you proceed, one question. Rodriguez snapped. We're not here for questions. Marcus tilted his head. Are you familiar with the legal ramifications of unlawful detention? Kim hesitated. That wasn't a question most passengers knew how to ask. Morrison cut in. Voice sharp. You're trespassing, sir. We have the right to remove any passenger for any reason. Actually, Marcus interrupted, reaching for his briefcase. Let me clarify what those rights really mean. Rodriguez's grip tightened. No sudden movements. I'm retrieving documentation you requested, Marcus said evenly. 5 minutes to departure. Morrison's radio buzzed again. Captain, CNN is calling our media line. Fox News requesting comment. Handle immediately. This is national. He felt the walls close in. Jessica's certainty was gone, replaced by fear. Marcus looked up, calm, composed, deadly certain. The kind of documentation, he said softly, that explains why removing me would end all of your careers. Asterisk. Captain Morrison stood frozen in the aisle as his radio crackled again. The voice from operations sounding tenser now. Captain, we're seeing national outlets picking this up. Handle this discreetly immediately. But the eyes of 147 passengers were already locked on him. Cameras glimmered like tiny stars in the dimmed cabin lights. There was no discreet way out. Marcus Williams sat perfectly still, calm as ever. As though he'd been expecting every second of this, Jessica's breath came in quick, shallow bursts. "He's lying," she insisted, voice trembling. "That ID, that card, he's using them to intimidate us." Marcus looked at her steadily. "You're certain of that, Ms. Martinez?" "Absolutely," she snapped. "Look at him. He's just sitting there like he owns the plane." A ripple of laughter moved through the cabin, though it wasn't kind. Phones tilted higher, capturing every twitch, every crack in her voice. Captain Morrison lifted his chin, trying to regain command of the situation. "Sir, let's make this simple. Either you come with security now, or we have to forcibly remove you." Marcus glanced at his watch again. "Captain, in about 20 seconds. That won't be an option," and just like that, Morrison's phone rang. The caller ID flashed: Southwest Corporate HQ, urgent priority. He hesitated, eyes flicking to Marcus. The man just smiled faintly and nodded toward the phone. "You might want to answer that." The voice of power. Morrison lifted the receiver. "Captain Morrison speaking." A sharp female voice cut through the static. "Captain, this is Patricia Watkins, Senior Vice President of Operations. We're monitoring your flight. Do not take further action until you've spoken with me, ma'am. With all due respect, not ma'am." "Captain, listen." Her tone left no room for authority but her own. "Your cabin is being broadcast live on 3 social media platforms. 48,000 viewers. Any misstep now could result in a federal discrimination suit and catastrophic PR exposure." Morrison's throat went dry. "Understood," Patricia continued. "We're dispatching our legal and communications teams to Phoenix. Do not repeat. Do not remove that passenger." "Yes, ma'am." He lowered the phone slowly. Jessica blinked, confused. "What did they say?" Morrison's voice was barely audible. "They said not to remove him." The entire cabin erupted. Murmurs, whispers, the metallic rustle of phones being raised higher. Emma's stream viewer count soared past 55,000. The reveal begins. Marcus finally spoke again, his tone calm and surgical. "Captain Morrison, before we proceed, I'd like you to know who you've been speaking to." Rodriguez crossed his arms. "You're not scaring anyone with your lawyer talk." Marcus reached into his briefcase slowly, deliberately, and drew out a slim, embossed leather folder. The logo was subtle, stamped in silver. He opened it and slid out a single business card. "Officer Kim," he said, holding it toward her. "Would you please read this aloud for everyone?" Kim frowned but took it. Her eyes moved across the card, then froze, her face drained of color. "It says, Marcus Williams, Board of Directors, Southwest Airlines." For a second, time seemed to stop. Jessica blinked, her jaw slack. No, that can't be real. "Board members don't fly commercial." Marcus smiled faintly. "Sometimes we do. Especially when we're auditing firsthand how our passengers are treated." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Phones caught every word, every detail. Morrison felt his heart sink as the weight of it hit him. "Board of Directors?" he whispered. "Correct," Marcus said softly. "And you, Captain Morrison, are currently live on the internet, ordering the unlawful removal of one of your company's own board members." Morrison's mouth went dry. We had no way of knowing, sir." Marcus tilted his head. "That's precisely the point." The Fallout Star's cabin was silent except for Jessica's shaky breathing. Morrison's radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't operations. The voice that came through was deeper, older, commanding. "Captain Morrison, this is Senior Vice President Davidson. We're aware of the situation on Flight 2847. You are to take no further action against the passenger in CTA. Corporate is handling this directly." Davidson. The name alone carried weight. Morrison had only seen it on company memos, never heard it directed at him. Marcus sat back, adjusting his cufflinks with quiet precision. "Captain Morrison," he said, "I believe you had concerns about my documentation." Morrison swallowed hard. "Sir, we of the crew had no way of knowing." "That's right," Marcus interrupted gently. "You assumed. You all assumed." Jessica's breathing turned into small sobs. The magnitude of what she'd said, what she'd done, crashed into her all at once. The power of the internet. Emma's stream now read 60,000 live viewers. The chat was a blur. "He's a board member. They're finished. This is history happening right now." Rodriguez slowly lowered his restraints, the plastic zip ties dangling uselessly in his hands. Kim stared at the business card as though it were radioactive. Jessica collapsed into a seat. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "That's the thing about bias, Ms. Martinez. You never think you have it, until you do." The line hit her like a gunshot. Morrison wanted to say something, anything, but there was nothing left to defend. A question that shattered silence. Emerson finally found his voice. "Sir, if you're really on the board, why didn't you identify yourself immediately?" Marcus looked up, his gaze piercing. Why should I have to prove who I am to sit in a seat I paid for? The words hung in the air like thunder. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Captain, have you ever asked a white passenger for extra identification? Morrison's lips parted, but no sound came. He realized the answer as soon as the question was asked. No. Marcus continued, his tone steady. You wouldn't? Because you'd already decided they belonged? Jessica let out a broken sob. Her own words replayed in her mind. People like him don't usually fly first class. The cabin was still. No one dared move. History in real time. Marcus exhaled and leaned back in his seat. Do you understand now, Captain? What just happened here? You followed protocol, yes, but whose protocol was it? The kind written to justify prejudice. The captain's throat tightened. We were just trying to ensure safety. Safety? Marcus echoed. Tell me, Captain, what part of my existence was unsafe to you? My suit, my skin, my silence. Jessica's sobbing filled the space between them. Morrison looked away. He had never felt so small in his entire career. Then another call. Patricia Watkins's voice came again. But this time she wasn't addressing Morrison. She was addressing Marcus directly. Mr. Williams, the board is convening immediately. We're authorizing full authority on scene. Whatever you decide, we'll back it. Marcus's expression didn't change. Thank you, Patricia. He turned back to Morrison and Jessica. You're both about to learn what accountability looks like. The CEO joins the flight. A chime echoed through the cabin as Marcus's tablet lit up. A new video call connected instantly. 6 faces appeared on screen, executives in suits, seated around the gleaming conference table of the Southwest Airlines boardroom. Marcus, are you all right? Patricia's voice came through again, this time visible. I'm fine, Marcus replied. But I think Captain Morrison and his crew have some explaining to do. The passengers gasped. They were watching the entire Southwest executive board in real time. A man's voice joined calm, authoritative. This is Robert Jordan, CEO of Southwest Airlines. Captain Morrison, would you care to explain why one of our board members, our chairman, is being threatened with arrest? On his own airline? Chairman. Not just a board member. Chairman of the board. The air seemed to leave the cabin all at once. Jessica clutched the seat arm, her body trembling. Morrison's vision blurred as the words sank in. Chairman. The breaking point. Robert Jordan's face darkened. I want an explanation, Captain. Now. Sir? Morrison stammered. There was a misunderstanding. The crew, your crew reported what exactly? Jordan snapped. That a man in a suit, sitting quietly, was suspicious? No one spoke. The silence was deafening. Marcus turned the tablet toward Jessica. Ms. Martinez, he said softly. Would you like to explain to the CEO what you told me about people like me? Jessica's face crumpled. I didn't mean. Her words dissolved into sobs. Kim took a step back, shaking her head. We were just following reports, sir. Robert Jordan cut in sharply. We've reviewed footage from 3 different angles. Mr. Williams was calm, compliant, and silent. There was no threat, no disruption. What exactly was this about, then? Marcus's voice was quiet, controlled. It was about assumption. She assumed I didn't belong. She assumed I was lying. She assumed I was dangerous. Every assumption came from one thing. He paused. The next word hit like a hammer. My appearance. The cabin fell deathly silent. Emma's chat exploded again. He said it. This is history. Okay, watching live. Jessica's tears dripped onto her trembling hands. She wanted to disappear, to rewind the last 30 minutes and erase them from existence. But there was no going back now. This wasn't just an airline incident. It was a public reckoning unfolding live before the entire world. The end of denial. Marcus tapped his tablet again, switching to a new screen. It displayed internal corporate messages in real time. Legal team mobilizing. Peer crisis active. Stock volatility expected. He turned the device toward the cabin so everyone could see. Ladies and gentlemen, he said clearly. This is how bias becomes a lawsuit. How prejudice becomes a headline. How one decision, made in arrogance, can cost millions. Morrison stood frozen. Jessica sobbed quietly. The officer said nothing. Then Marcus looked straight into Emma's camera lens. And this is how it ends when the truth can't be silenced anymore. The countdown intercom buzzed again. Captain Morrison, tower control here. We've got 17 news vans waiting at Phoenix Sky Harbor. FAA requesting full incident reports. Complete departure immediately. 17 news vans. It was already too late. Robert Jordan's voice came through the tablet one last time. Captain, you will complete this flight. Mr. Williams remains in his seat. Upon arrival, report directly to corporate headquarters. He turned to Jessica. Ms. Martinez, you will not speak to passengers or crew again. HR will meet you at the gate. Jessica could only nod through her tears. Marcus closed his tablet and set it neatly on his tray table. "Now," he said quietly, "let's finish this flight." The engines rumbled to life beneath them, and as the aircraft began to taxi, the cabin hummed with whispered disbelief. Somewhere high above, social media servers groaned under the weight of 100,000 live viewers, but inside Seat 2A, Marcus Williams sat calm, composed, and in control, ready to turn humiliation into history. The cabin lights dimmed as Flight to 847 taxied onto the runway. The engines rumbled beneath the floor, a low growl that vibrated through every seat. Outside, the late afternoon sun burned gold across the tarmac. Inside, silence. No one was reading. No one was talking. No one even dared to breathe aloud. Everyone was watching him, the man in Seat 2A, who just an hour ago had been accused of trespassing, and now sat calmly like a judge presiding over his own courtroom. Marcus Williams didn't speak. He didn't need to. His authority filled the cabin like invisible pressure. The same passengers who had looked away before were now glued to their screens, desperate to witness history unfold in real time. Emma Morgan's live stream counter ticked upward. 113,000 live viewers. And climbing. A flight reborn in silence. Captain Morrison sat in the cockpit, hands trembling on the throttle. 23 years of spotless service. Thousands of flights logged without a single disciplinary action. And it was all unraveling before his eyes. He could still hear the voice of the CEO echoing in his head. Why is our chairman being threatened with arrest? He glanced at the co-pilot beside him. Neither spoke. What could they say? Every movement was being monitored, every facial expression dissected online. Clear for takeoff. Flight 2847, came the tower's voice. Copy, Morrison managed. His throat was dry. The plane accelerated down the runway. The nose lifted. And as the wheels left the ground, the world outside dissolved into clouds and light, while the world inside turned into something entirely new. Jessica's reckoning. Jessica Martinez sat in the jump seat, seatbelt clasped, tears drying on her cheeks. For 8 years, she had served passengers faithfully, smiling, pouring coffee, thanking strangers. She had believed she was good at her job, that she was fair, that she treated everyone equally. But now, her words echoed in her head, looping over and over. Does he look like he belongs in first class? She hadn't even thought about it when she said it. It just slipped out, easy as breathing. Now it was being replayed by millions of people online. Every major network had picked up the stream. Her name was trending. Her career was over, and worse, she knew she deserved it. Marcus noticed her reflection in the window. Her shoulders hunched, her hands trembling. For a brief moment, pity flickered behind his calm exterior. He reached for his phone. The signal was weak but still connected. A notification popped up, CNN requesting live statement. He ignored it. He wasn't ready yet. Not until they landed. He leaned back, whispering more to himself than anyone else. Sometimes change doesn't start in boardrooms. It starts in messes like this. In the sky, the story spread. Emma Morgan kept streaming. Her voice was steady now, confident. Her shock had transformed into purpose. Guys, she said softly to her phone camera, if you're just joining, we're 30,000 feet up. The man in Seat 2A is Marcus Williams, the chairman of Southwest Airlines. This isn't a rumor. It's confirmed. The CEO spoke to him live 10 minutes ago. I don't think anyone here realizes how big this is. Her viewers flooded the chat. This is the next civil rights story. He's exposing them live. Never flying Southwest again. Actually, maybe now I will. Emma swallowed hard, realizing something profound. The man she was filming wasn't just saving himself. He was changing the way people looked at power, authority, and prejudice right in front of their eyes. Inside the cockpit at 30,000 feet. Captain Morrison kept his gaze fixed on the horizon. His first officer, Kyle, finally broke the silence. Sir, do you think we're finished? Morrison didn't answer immediately. He just exhaled. You ever make one mistake so big it swallows your whole life? Kyle hesitated. You followed procedure. Morrison shook his head slowly. Procedure is supposed to serve justice, not replace it. I didn't ask questions because I didn't have to. That's what privilege looks like, son. You never even realize you've got it until it ruins you. His hands tightened around the yoke. I've been the kind of captain who thinks calmness equals control. But what's control worth if you're blind? Kyle looked away. What happens when we land? Morrison laughed quietly, a bitter sound. I suppose we'll find out. A lesson at 30,000 feet in first class. Marcus opened his tablet again. The glow from the screen lit his face, highlighting the stillness in his eyes. A document filled the display. Southwest Airlines Discrimination Report, Q2 Internal Audit. 47 incidents. 47 passengers humiliated, questioned, or removed in the past 3 months alone. He had read every single report himself. Most involved passengers of color. Some were brushed off as misunderstandings, others ended in lawsuits quietly settled out of court. He had been planning this field test for weeks, buying his own ticket, using his personal name instead of his corporate title, waiting to see if the system he helped oversee would recognize its own hypocrisy. It hadn't. Jessica stood shakily, stepping closer to his row. "Mr. Williams," she whispered. Marcus looked up, his gaze unreadable. "Yes, Ms. Martinez?" Her voice broke. I want to apologize. I didn't mean what?" She swallowed. "Didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just thought." He cut her off gently but firmly. "You thought wrong." Her tears returned. "I know. I've been replaying every word. I don't even know why I said it, because you didn't have to think," Marcus said quietly. "That's the danger. Bias doesn't announce itself. It hides in comfort, in habits, in excuses." Jessica nodded slowly, unable to look him in the eye. "What happens to me now?" Marcus sighed. "That depends on what you do next." Corporate panic far below. In a high-rise glass tower in Dallas, the Southwest executive team was in crisis mode. Phones rang nonstop. Lawyers crowded conference tables. Screens displayed hashtags trending worldwide. Hashtag Southwest scandal. Hashtag flight to 847. Hashtag justice in the sky. Robert Jordan, the CEO, stood at the head of the boardroom, his expression stone hard. "How bad is it?" A PR officer replied. "CNN, ABC, and Reuters are all running it live." Twitter's full meltdown. Estimated social reach, 20 million in the first hour. Stock price? Down 7%. It'll drop further before close. Legal exposure? Massive. The chairman himself was a victim. Every word of that flight is evidence. Jordan rubbed his forehead. "Then we turn this into a statement, not a scandal. Draft the press release." Marcus was right, this industry needed a wake-up call. "Now we'll be the first to admit it." The room fell silent. No one had ever heard their CEO say that before. 35,000 feet of truth back in the air. Marcus closed his tablet and stood. Every camera followed him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, his voice carrying through the cabin, "you've all witnessed something extraordinary today. You've seen what happens when assumptions meet accountability." Every head turned toward him. He continued, "For years, passengers like me have been treated as anomalies, as if success has a skin tone. Today, that ends. Today, you all became witnesses to a new standard, not just for this airline, but for the world." Emma's hand trembled as she held her phone, whispering to her chat. "You're watching history." Marcus turned to Jessica. "Ms. Martinez, look at me." Her eyes lifted. "Do you believe you can change?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I want to." "Good," Marcus said quietly. "Because redemption isn't given, it's earned." "The sky is a mirror." Morrison's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude. Estimated flight time to Phoenix, 1 hour, 20 minutes. He switched off the mic and let out a long breath. His co-pilot glanced over. "Sir? Something tells me this flight will be in the history books," Morrison murmured. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew it wasn't just his career on the line anymore, it was his conscience. Emma's broadcast in seat for A. Emma looked into her camera. "This is more than a viral clip. This is proof that when you film, when you speak up, when you refuse to look away, change becomes real. Don't just comment. Remember this moment next time you see injustice and decide whether you'll record or stay silent." The chat filled with hearts and fire emojis. Some viewers cried. Others promised to share the story across every platform they had. "Mr. Williams just showed us that even power can be humble and that even those with power have to prove it sometimes," Emma said softly. Marcus turned slightly, meeting her gaze. He gave a single nod of respect. The quiet before descent as the flight neared its midpoint. The mood began to shift. The fear had turned into reflection. The anger had turned into awareness. Passengers who'd once watched silently now exchanged glances of discomfort, realizing they, too, had judged him. An elderly man in 3B leaned forward and said quietly, "For what it's worth, sir, I'm sorry. I didn't speak up." Marcus smiled faintly. "You did now. That's a start." Outside, sunlight flickered across the clouds like shards of gold. Inside, the world was changing 30,000 feet above the ground. A final thought. Jessica sat back down, wiping her eyes. Morrison stayed silent in the cockpit. Emma's stream held steady at 145,000 viewers. Marcus Williams closed his eyes for a moment, his thoughts steady. He knew this was just the beginning, the next phase of something larger than himself. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with sirens or lawyers or angry speeches. Sometimes justice boards a plane quietly, sits in seat 2A, and waits for the world to reveal itself. The sky outside glowed in molten gold as Flight to 847 began its descent into Phoenix. Clouds tore past the windows like thin curtains, and below, The desert stretched endlessly, a patchwork of ochre and shadow. Inside the cabin, however, there was no peace. Every passenger felt the tension coil tighter with each passing minute. Phones buzzed constantly. Notifications chimed. Emma Morgan's livestream had passed 160,000 viewers, now simulcast by national news outlets. Commentators were already calling it the flight that exposed corporate prejudice in real time. In row 2, Marcus Williams sat motionless, fingers folded over his tablet. His eyes were calm but his jaw was tight. Every few seconds, he checked his watch, then the aisle. Then the flight attendant trembling across from him. Jessica Martinez hadn't spoken in over half an hour. Her makeup had streaked from tears, her breathing uneven. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was full of consequences. The weight of the descent in the cockpit. Captain Derek Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. Current weather in Phoenix is clear, temperature 88 degrees. Please fasten your seatbelts." He muted the microphone, slumping back into his seat. His co-pilot Kyle looked over cautiously. "Sir, what happens when we land?" Morrison didn't answer immediately. He stared at the endless horizon ahead, beautiful, bright, and utterly unforgiving. "Son, when we land, my career ends." Kyle hesitated. "You don't know that yet." "Oh, I do," Morrison said bitterly. "They're waiting for me. HR, legal, maybe the FAA. You don't survive something like this. Not when the man you humiliated runs a company." He rubbed his forehead. "I spent my whole life keeping control of the cockpit. Turns out I lost control of myself instead." In first class, Jessica's headset buzzed faintly. She jumped. "Jessica," came a familiar voice, her supervisor at the Phoenix hub. "We've been monitoring the flight. Legal's here. HR too. They want a full statement the second you land. Do not engage the passenger again." Jessica's eyes darted toward Marcus. "I already did," the voice hardened. "Then keep your mouth shut until counsel arrives." "Understood." "Yes," she whispered, voice cracking. She clicked the earpiece off and stared at the floor. In her chest, something broke open, a mix of regret and shame so sharp it almost felt like pain. Marcus finally spoke. "You've been quiet, Ms. Martinez." Jessica flinched. "Sir, please don't stir me," he said softly. "Not anymore." She looked up at him with red eyes. "I know I'm finished, maybe," he said. "But being finished isn't the same as being beyond redemption." Her lip trembled. "Do you really think anyone will forgive me?" Marcus studied her for a long, painful moment. "No," he said finally. "Not yet. But you'll have to learn to live with that until you do the work." The broadcast bellowed at that very moment. 1,200 miles away in New York, the evening anchors of Good Morning America were breaking the story live. A shocking scene is unfolding midair aboard Southwest Flight 2847, the anchor announced. Video footage shows a black man, now confirmed to be Marcus Williams, the company's own chairman, being accused of fraud by flight staff. The confrontation has gone viral, with over 160,000 live viewers across multiple platforms. Screens all over the world flicker with clips of the exchange, Jessica's trembling accusations, Morrison's confused authority, Marcus's calm composure. Every second in the air was being broadcast on the ground. By the time the aircraft began its final descent into Phoenix, the terminal below was crawling with cameras, federal investigators, and lawyers in dark suits. Cabin tension. Emma's voice trembled as she updated her viewers. "We're descending now. I can see the ground. The media is already waiting. They're saying this could change airline law forever." Her chat exploded with support. "Stay live. Get footage of the landing. Justice in the sky." Marcus turned his head slightly. "Ms. Morgan," he said, his tone measured but kind. She blinked. "Yes, sir. When we land, keep filming, but don't film me. Film them, the people who made this right. You have a chance to show what accountability looks like." Emma nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, Mr. Williams." Tower control. Chaos on the ground down below. At Phoenix Sky Harbor International, the control tower was a battlefield of radio chatter. Flight 2847 inbound from Dallas requesting immediate gate assignment. Copy that, 2847. Be advised, media presence heavy. Law enforcement on standby. Across the tarmac, a line of black SUVs idled beside Gate 12. Network vans with dish antennas surrounded the terminal. News crews jockeyed for position, microphones in hand inside the terminal. Robert Jordan, Southwest CEO, stood beside Inspector General Torres of the FAA's Civil Rights Division. "Any word from the cockpit?" Jordan asked, voice clipped. Torres shook his head. "They're descending now. We'll debrief them separately. I've already notified Justice." Jordan's jaw tightened. "Good, this isn't going to be another PR cleanup. It's going to be a reckoning." The final approach back in the air, the seatbelt signs glowed. The cabin tilted slightly as the plane descended through light turbulence. Passengers murmured nervously. Marcus exhaled slowly, centering himself. He wasn't nervous. He was focused for weeks. He prepared for this moment, the moment when silence would no longer protect anyone. The goal was never humiliation. It was reform. He looked out the window. The desert blurred beneath them. The Phoenix skyline gleamed ahead like a mirage. He whispered under his breath. "It ends today." The captain's apology. Cabin crew, "Prepare for landing," Morrison announced. But his voice cracked. He shut off the mic and turned to Kyle. "I need to do something before we hit the ground." Kyle frowned. "Sir, protocol. Protocol got us here." Morrison unbuckled his harness, pushed open the cockpit door, and stepped into the aisle rear breach during descent. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Jessica looked up in shock. "Captain, you can't." But Morrison ignored her. He walked slowly to seat A, his uniform damp with sweat. He stood before Marcus like a man at confession. "Mr. Williams," he began, voice trembling. "There's no excuse for what happened. I failed in judgment and in leadership. I allowed my authority to silence my humanity." Marcus stared at him. "Why now?" "Because if I wait until we land, it'll sound like strategy," Morrison said quietly. "I need to say it while it still matters, for the first time since the confrontation began." Marcus's expression softened. "Then say it." Morrison drew a deep breath. "I was wrong. And I'm sorry." The words seemed to ripple through the cabin like wind through tall grass. Passengers who had been silent began nodding. A few even clapped quietly. Jessica covered her mouth, sobbing. Emma whispered to her viewers, "You're watching the captain apologize to the chairman at 30,000 feet. The comment section exploded with hearts. Landing wheels hit the tarmac with a heavy, decisive thud. The reverse thrusters roared. The aircraft slowed, trembling under its own weight. Outside the windows, flashing red and blue lights lined the runway. Security vehicles followed the plane as it taxied toward Gate 12. Inside, no one spoke. The only sound was the whine of the engines winding down. "Welcome to Phoenix," Morrison said finally, voice thick. "And thank you for flying Southwest Airlines." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. At the gutties, the doors opened, chaos erupted. Floodlights, cameras, microphones. It was a wall of sound. Marcus rose from his seat slowly, adjusting his cufflinks, calm as ever. He turned to Morrison and Jessica. "You'll both come with me," he said. "You're part of the story now." Jessica's knees nearly buckled. Morrison nodded numb-eyed as they stepped into the jet bridge. The flashbulbs exploded. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Williams, were you profiling a setup?" "Captain Morrison, are you being suspended?" "Ms. Martinez, do you regret your actions?" Marcus raised a hand, silencing them. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said clearly, "everything you need to know is already online. But I'll say this, today wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Sometimes, the only way to fix a broken system is to show it breaking in front of everyone." The cameras fell silent for a moment. Then came the roar of questions again. But Marcus had already moved on. The press room 30 minutes later. Inside a private conference room at Phoenix HQ. The scene was surreal. Executive lined one wall, HR officers the other. Inspector Torres sat with a tablet open, reviewing evidence. The live stream replayed silently on the big screen. Jessica's words, Morrison's order, Marcus's calm defiance. Jordan stood at the front, facing the crew. "Captain Morrison, Ms. Martinez," he said evenly. "You are both suspended effective immediately pending full investigation." Jessica began to cry again. Morrison stared straight ahead. Marcus stepped forward. "Hold on." Jordan turned, surprised. "Marcus." "Let them stay," Marcus said. "Not as employees. As witnesses. They're the reason this change will mean something." Torres looked up from his tablet. "Change?" Marcus nodded. "I'm instituting a new policy effective immediately, the Williams Protocol. Mandatory anti-bias and empathy training for every employee, from pilot to gate agent." Jordan blinked. "Marcus, that's not policy approval procedure. It is now," Marcus interrupted. "Because this isn't PR anymore. It's survival." A shift in the room. Tension broke like a wave. Executives whispered among themselves. Torres leaned forward. "And who's leading this initiative?" Marcus turned to Jessica. "She is." Jessica froze. "Me?" "Yes, you'll work under compliance. Every class will start with your story. Your mistake will be the reason others never repeat it." Her voice shook. "Why would you trust me with that?" Marcus met her gaze. "Because accountability isn't punishment, it's purpose." For the first time, Jessica didn't cry. She just nodded. The final linea outside the glass walls. The desert sunset bathed the tarmac in deep orange light. Morrison sat in the corner, staring out at the runway where his plane still rested. He whispered to himself, "Every landing is a second chance." Marcus overheard him and smiled faintly. Then let's make this one count, Captain. He turned toward the cameras now waiting outside the conference room. The press would demand a statement soon. The story wasn't over, it was just beginning. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from the courtroom or Congress, sometimes it lands quietly at Gate 12 in Phoenix. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows of Southwest Airlines headquarters in Dallas. The sky was bright and clear, a cruel contrast to the chaos inside. Phones rang nonstop, the air hummed with tension. Executives hurried between conference rooms, clutching tablets, whispering into Bluetooth earpieces. Every news channel was running the same headline: Chairman humiliated on his own airline. Flight 2847 sparks national outrage. Stock analysts called it the worst PR crisis in Southwest's history. Social media called it justice. And Marcus Williams, the man at the center of it all, sat in silence at the end of a long oak table, watching the board squirm. The boardroom. Robert Jordan, the CEO, was pale. He'd been up all night fielding calls from federal regulators and investors. He adjusted his tie nervously. Marcus, the legal department is recommending a full suspension of Captain Morrison and Ms. Martinez. We're preparing formal apologies to the public. The press wants a live statement by noon. Marcus didn't respond right away. He looked down at his tablet, scrolling through a spreadsheet of numbers, customer complaints, racial discrimination reports, settlements paid quietly over the past decade. Finally, he spoke, calm, cold, deliberate. An apology won't be enough this time, Robert. The room stilled. A middle-aged board member cleared his throat. Marcus, with all due respect, you're too close to this. This was personal. Marcus's eyes lifted. They were sharp enough to cut steel. Yes, he said, and maybe that's the only reason it's finally being handled honestly. No one dared interrupt again. The Faluth head of PR stood. We've lost nearly $800 million in market value overnight. Social sentiments at record lows. The NAACP, ACLU, and the Department of Transportation have all announced formal reviews. The FAA wants to meet within 48 hours. Jordan pinched the bridge of his nose. What's the customer response? Mixed, said the PR head. Some are furious. Others are saying this proves our leadership is human, that we're confronting the truth head on. Marcus leaned forward. Then that's our opportunity. Marcus's plane turned his tablet toward the others. On the screen was a proposal labeled The Williams Initiative, Restoring Dignity in the Skies. He spoke slowly, letting the gravity of each word settle. This isn't about one flight. It's about the culture that made that flight possible for years. We've talked about inclusion, about fairness, but we've never held ourselves accountable. That ends today. He tapped the screen. Starting immediately, Southwest will implement 3 measures: the Williams Protocol, a transparent process, requiring 2 authority verification for any passenger removal. No single pilot or attendant will have absolute power again. Empathy Training Division, every employee from the flight deck to the janitorial staff will undergo behavioral and bias training, led by an external ethics team. Public Oversight Board, composed of civil rights experts and independent observers. All data on passenger complaints will be published quarterly. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. That's ambitious, said one board member cautiously. It could expose us legally. It'll save us morally, Marcus replied. The pushback and author executive leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Marcus, we can't just tear apart our operational structure overnight. The pilots' union won't agree. HR will need months to implement. Marcus cut him off. Then they can start today. Because if we don't, the public will tear it apart for us. Do you want reform? Or do you want ruin? Silence. Finally, Robert Jordan exhaled. You've got the room's attention. What's next? Marcus stood and paced slowly toward the window. Outside, planes taxied across a sunlit runway. What's next, he said, is that we stop pretending this is just about damage control. We're not fixing a PR problem. We're fixing a people problem. He turned back, voice rising. You saw that flight. You saw how easy it was for assumption to become action. That was one woman's bias and one man's silence, multiplied by a corporation's indifference. And now the whole world's watching to see if we mean what we say about equality. No one spoke. The public statement be noon. The cameras were ready. A press conference was set up in the main lobby, microphones, lights, reporters lining every wall. Marcus walked to the podium in his navy suit, the same one he'd worn on Flight 2847. Behind him stood Robert Jordan, Captain Morrison, and Jessica Martinez. Gasps filled the room when people saw the 2 crew members. Marcus began. Yesterday, on Flight 2847, a moment of prejudice turned into a national lesson. I was a passenger removed from that flight. I was also the chairman of this airline. And I was treated not as a leader, not as a customer, but as a stereotype. Flashbulbs popped, reporters leaned forward. But this isn't about revenge, Marcus continued. It's about reflection. Because I believe accountability can coexist with compassion. I believe good people can make bad choices and still change. He turned to Jessica and Morrison. These two individuals made mistakes. Yes, but they're also willing to confront them, to learn, and to help us build something better. Jessica's eyes welled up. Morrison looked like he hadn't slept in days. Marcus faced the cameras again, starting today. Southwest Airlines will lead the industry in transparency, diversity, and accountability. The Williams Initiative begins now. Applause broke out among employees in the crowd. Cameras flashed brighter. This is not a story about scandal, he said, voice firm. It's a story about transformation. Behind the cameras when the conference ended, reporters swarmed Jessica and Morrison. Do you think you'll lose your jobs? How does it feel to be at the center of the story? Do you think the public will forgive you? Jessica hesitated, then said quietly, I hope they don't forgive us too soon because we still have work to do. The honesty stunned the crowd. In the quiet afterlitter that evening, Marcus sat alone in his office. Watching the sunset spill gold across the Dallas skyline, the chaos had slowed. But the exhaustion lingered. He scrolled through messages from employees across the country, pilots, flight attendants, mechanics. Thank you for standing up for us. We've needed this for a long time. I didn't realize how many times I'd stayed silent. Each message felt like a small weight lifting from his chest. Robert Jordan knocked and stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. You just turned a scandal into a movement, he said quietly. Marcus smiled faintly. We're not there yet. Jordan sat across from him. Do you think they'll ever trust us again? They'll trust us, Marcus said, when we earn it, not when we ask for it. The human cost down the hall. Jessica sat in an HR office under harsh fluorescent light. A lawyer read through paperwork. You understand the terms of your reassignment? Yes, she said softly. You'll be transferred to the new empathy training division as a field coordinator. You'll report directly to Mr. Williams. Jessica nodded. I understand. The lawyer looked up. You know, most people in your position would have just resigned. Jessica's eyes were red but steady. Running away won't fix what I broke. Asterisk a call from the postas. The building emptied. Marcus's phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. Mr. Williams, yes, this is Inspector Torres from the FAA Civil Rights Office. I wanted to say, what you did today, it's unprecedented. We're drafting new federal guidelines for passenger removals. I'd like you to advise on the task force. Marcus smiled faintly. I'll be there. He hung up. Exhaling deeply, outside. The runway shimmered under floodlights. He could see planes taking off, bright silver arrows, vanishing into the night. For the first time in 2 days, Marcus allowed himself to feel something like peace. Across the country, Emma Morgan's live stream replay now had over 9 million views. The title read, Flight 2847, the moment justice took off. Clips were trending. On TikTok, late-night hosts were talking about it, and high school teachers were playing it in ethics classes. Emma sat at her desk in Chicago, her phone vibrating nonstop. Emails, sponsorships, interview requests, all flooding in. But instead of monetizing it, she uploaded one more video. Don't just watch the story, learn from it, because racism doesn't always look like hate. Sometimes it looks like a smile, a uniform, and an assumption. Within an hour, it had 100,000 likes. Late night at headquarters, Marcus packed up his briefcase. On his desk sat the leather folder from the flight, his ticket, his ID, his Amex card, and the handwritten note he'd taken midair. Power means nothing if it never faces itself. He slipped the note into his pocket. Before leaving, he stopped by the training office. Through the glass, Jessica sat alone, typing on her laptop, outlining the first empathy session curriculum. He knocked gently. She looked up, startled. Mr. Williams, she said. Marcus smiled softly. No titles tonight, just Marcus. She nodded nervously. I'm working on the first module. Recognizing hidden bias, it's harder than I thought. That's the point, he said. If it were easy, we wouldn't need it. Jessica hesitated. Do you really believe people can change? Marcus looked at her steadily. I have to. Otherwise, what was all of this for? Closing scene hours later. The building was dark except for Marcus's office light. He stood by the window, looking out at a single jet taking off. Flight 1521. Bound for Denver. He whispered to himself. Let this one be better below. The runway light stretched into infinity, a glowing path into the night. Like a promise waiting to be kept, because change, he knew, wasn't about grounding planes. It was about lifting people. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus Williams felt the sky was big enough for everyone. Asterisk the day after the press conference. Dallas woke up to rain. Not sweet, cinematic drizzle, a hard, slate gray downpour that slapped the windows of Southwest HQ and turned the parking lot into a mirror. Inside, The calm from last night evaporated by 7 a.m. emails stacked like dominoes. The unions wanted answers. The FAA wanted timestamps. Cable news wanted fresh soundbites. Investors wanted to know whether the Williams initiative meant a softer stance on unruly passengers. And 1,000 frontline employees wanted to know one thing: what happens to us if we mess up? Accidentally. Marcus arrived before sunrise and took the elevator straight to the war room, a repurposed conference space humming with screens. One showed real-time social sentiment. Another showed gate delays across the network. A third scrolled the first draft of the Williams Protocol implementation checklist. Morning, Robert Jordan said, handing him a coffee that had definitely been poured from the first pot on Earth. Union call in 10. Pilots or attendants? Both. Perfect, Marcus said. Let's talk to the people who can actually make or break this. He set his briefcase down and took a breath. Day 2 of a transformation is always the ugliest. Day 1 has speeches and applause. Day 2 has consequences. The union's dial-in screen filled with faces from across the country. Captains with silver hair and stern eyes. Flight attendants in polo shirts. Base reps seated under fluorescent lights. The moderator introduced them rapid fire. Captain Ron Adler, Dallas Base. Captain Liao, Oakland. FA Rep Tanya Reyes, Midway. For Rep Sinclair, Orlando. Ron spoke first. His voice carried the gravel of 30 winters of 5 a.m. pushbacks. Mr. Williams, nobody condones what happened on Flight 2847. But I need to know whether your new rules tie captains' hands in emergencies. Emergencies? Marcus asked gently. Or assumptions? Ron's jaw ticked. Both sometimes look the same in the moment. Tanya leaned forward. Look, we're with you on bias training. Some folks need it. But yesterday our Chicago crew had a real drunk in row 7 yelling, spitting. Are we supposed to convene a committee mid-flight to decide whether he goes? No, Marcus said. The Williams Protocol doesn't mean paralysis. It means accountability. To authority verification isn't a committee. It's one other trained professional. A second check. That could be the lead FA or the first officer depending on the situation. Captain Liao cut in. And if they disagree? Then we escalate to ops via cockpit SATCOM, and the decision is documented in real time. The point is not to slow you down. It's to make sure the next removal has more behind it than one person's gut. A beat of silence. From the corner tile, a younger voice chimed in. First Officer Jay Patel, Phoenix. With all due respect, sir. Yesterday made me look at myself. I keep a mental list of who's likely trouble boarding at midnight in Vegas. I didn't think of that as bias. I thought of it as experience. He swallowed. Maybe I've been wrong. Tanya nodded slowly. Same, I can spot a seat kicker at 20 yards. But that's not the same as deciding who belongs in first class. The room softened. Even Ron's shoulders dropped a fraction. Marcus said, we'll still move people when we must. Safety's non-negotiable. But we'll do it with receipts, not reflexes. He looked into the camera. And I'll say this plainly, I'm not out to catch you failing. I'm out to build a system that helps you succeed even on your worst day. If you follow the protocol, we will stand behind you, publicly. That landed, Ron grunted. All right, send the language. I'll push it at the pilot council. Tanya raised a finger. But we need the training to be real, not a slideshow with stock photos and corny quizzes. Marcus nodded. You'll get case studies, real footage and uncomfortable conversations, including with me. Then you'll have bodies in the room, Tanya said. Even the stubborn ones. Jessica's first day in purgatory down the hall. Jessica Martinez sat at a long table, with a half-eaten muffin and a laptop set to 80% brightness. Because her hands were still trembling, the draft slide deck on screen read, Empathy Session 01, recognizing hidden bias in the aisle. She typed. Deleted, retyped. Bias doesn't make you a monster. Refusing to confront it does. She stared. It felt true. A knock on the door. Emma Morgan. Yes, that Emma, peeked in, holding a camera but not filming. Can I? She asked. Jessica's stomach flipped. The woman who had accidentally put her on every screen in America. Sure, Jessica said. No live stream? Not today. I brought coffee. Emma set a cup down. Look, I didn't know your name when I hit live. I didn't know your kid would see it. I only knew what I saw was wrong. Jessica let out the strangest laugh, half hiccup, half gratitude. I know. If I'd been in your seat, I'd have hit live, too. They sat in the awkward quiet of two people who shared a catastrophe. Emma broke it first. What are you building? A training session that might save someone's job or life. Or dignity. She turned the screen, showed the outline, the checklist versus the person. Micro yes, saying yes to humanity in the moment. De-escalation without dehumanization. That last one, Emma said softly. That's the lesson, Jessica nodded, blinking hard. I used to think de-escalation meant Removing a person quickly. Now I think it means removing my fear quickly. Emma sat back. I'm going to steal that line in my next video. Please do, Jessica said. Almost smiling, asterisk the FAA meeting at 11. Marcus walked into Conference 7 with Inspector Torres from the FAA Civil Rights Office on video. Two lawyers joined from D.C., their faces part marble bust, part caffeine. We review the footage in your proposed protocol, Torres said. We want the two authority verification standard codified across carriers. One lawyer raised a brow. Be careful mandating process mid-operation. You don't want captains citing federal regs as a reason not to deplane a violent passenger. Marcus nodded. Understood. Put it this way, the standard applies unless there's an immediate safety hazard. When time permits, consult. When it doesn't, act and document, Torres jotted notes. You're also proposing body-worn cameras on lead FA letters during all boarding? Yes, Marcus said. Not as surveillance. As protection for passengers and crew. There's power in complete records. The lawyer finally smiled. So we stop litigating who said what, smart, and Marcus added. We want to pitch this as part of a broader aviation ethics framework. Call it cinematic moral drama, emotional life lesson story practice. If you want the documentary people to care, every airline has a story like Flight 2847 waiting to happen. Let ours be the last one that happens by accident. Torres leaned closer to his screen. Mr. Williams, I don't say this often to corporate leadership, thank you. Put your lawyers on with mine. Let's write the future. The test flight that afternoon. Flight 612 to Denver became the first aircraft to launch under the Williams protocol. A veteran captain. A brand new lead FA wearing a small, discreet body cam. A cabin brief that included the new language, if a situation arises involving passenger removal. The lead FA and flight deck will make a joint determination when time and safety allow. Dignity first, clarity first, safety first, row 12, a young man boarded with two cages. Therapy rabbits. Ears like oversized commas. The gate agent had approved them. The woman in 11C was allergic and already fanning her face dramatically. This is going to be a problem, she announced to nobody and everybody. Once upon a time, this would have spiraled. Today, the lead FA crouched to eye level and did something radical. She listened. Mum, I hear you. Let's get you comfortable. We have open seats forward. I'll move you now. Sir, I'll store one carrier near you and one in the closet. You'll sign a quick form for me, yeah? No ego. No escalation. The owl cleared in 90 seconds. In the jump seat before pushback. The captain clicked the interphone. Nice work, Maya. Thank you, Captain, and for the record, he added. My daughter would have fainted from joy seeing those rabbits. Maya grinned, adrenaline easing. I'll pretend I handled it for the children. Copy that, the captain said. And they laughed, a tiny, ordinary miracle. The backlash at 3 p.m. A conservative commentator roasted the Williams initiative on cable. Airlines going woke, criminals given first-class treatment, while crews are handcuffed by bureaucracy by 3:07. The clip was viral. By 3:30. Marcus's assistant leaned into his office. You don't want to see Twitter. I never do, he said. But Jordan walked in with a printout anyway. Some investors want reassurance we're not giving away authority. We're not, Marcus said. We're defining it. He took a pen and underlined a line from their own press release. Authority without accountability becomes abuse. Accountability without authority becomes chaos. We're building the space between. He slid the page back. Send this line to CNBC. Say it slow. Morrison's mirror in a windowless training room at the Dallas base. Derek Morrison watched the raw video of himself on flight to 847. Not the live stream. The angles from body cams and cabin cameras. His own face. Stern and brittle. His words, clipped and absolute. Officers, remove him. He flinched. A counselor sat beside him. Not speaking, just present. When the footage ended, Derek kept staring at the frozen frame of his own uniform. I've spent 23 years believing that decisive equals righteous, he said quietly. That hesitation kills, the counselor nodded. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it saves. Derek's jaw trembled. My son texted me last night. He said, Dad, I used to brag you were a captain. I still do. But in a different way now. What way is that? He said, the kind where you learn. Derek swallowed. I don't know how to lead like that. Not yet. You start by sitting where you are, the counselor said. Then you stand up and try. The first town hall. Marcus walked into the hangar turned auditorium to a sea of reflective vests and navy polos. Mechanics, ground crew, ramp agents, dispatchers. People whose names don't trend, but whose work keeps metal in the sky. He took a handheld mic. No podium, no slides. My dad wasn't a CEO, he began. He drove a city bus. He used to say, "Son, the job is simple. Get folks where they're going without making them smaller on the way." A low ripple of laughter. Then quiet. I didn't change in seat to A because people filmed me. I changed because I realized I'd been running an airline. That made room for 1,000 tiny cuts a day. Most invisible. Some bleeding. He scanned the crowd. Here's the truth. This only works if you call each other in, not out. If you show receipts. If you refuse to humiliate each other or our passengers. If you become, to borrow a phrase, a little more human at 35,000 feet. A mechanic in the front row, grease on his knuckles, asked, "What happens when we mess up halfway while trying?" "You'll answer for harm," Marcus said. "But we'll see your effort. We'll see your record." "Good faith counts," the mechanic nodded once. That was all he needed. Emma's new project a week earlier. Emma Morgan was a person with a phone. Today, she ran a tiny, fierce team inside Southwest, the Dignity Documentation Project. Not to catch employees in gotchas. To spotlight rescues, the quiet, skillful de-escalations nobody ever sees. She edited a 2-minute reel. Maya and the Rabbits. A gate agent who noticed a veteran struggling and arranged a silent boarding. A ramp team who paused a cargo load to return a backpack before push. She titled it, "Everyday Grace at 28 Gates." She hit publish. 600,000 views by dinner. Not outrage. In the comments, a pilot wrote, "This is why I fly." A passenger wrote, "This is why I booked again." Emma watched the view counter and thought of Jessica. Alone with her slide deck. She added a credit line. Training partner, J. Martinez. She didn't ask permission. Some things you just do. The night called rain finally stopped after dark. Marcus's office light cast a soft triangle on the carpet. The building had that after-hours hush. HVAC, distant vacuum. The hum of screensavers. His phone buzzed with a name he hadn't seen in a long time. Patricia Watkins, the SVP. Who'd first said chairman on that tablet in front of the world still awake? She asked. "Barely." He said, "You did well today. We almost broke the company yesterday." He replied, "We almost found it, too," she said. "I wanted to tell you something I've never said out loud. 10 years ago, a gate agent questioned my right to stand behind the counter because I'm Latina. I laughed it off. I didn't file anything. I told myself, pick your battles." She paused. "I think I picked silence too often." Marcus leaned back, eyes closed. "Me too. Keep going," Patricia said. "And get some sleep. Revolution needs RAM." He laughed in spite of himself. "Yes, ma'am." The closing image on Phoenix, Derek sat in his kitchen, uniform folded on a chair back. His son, Mateo, dozed on the couch, one arm over his face. A half-eaten bowl of cereal going soft. Derek opened his laptop and wrote an email to the pilot council. Subject: "I was wrong, colleagues. Yesterday I saw myself from the outside. It wasn't pretty. I won't defend it. I'm asking for your help to build a standard where our authority is stronger because it's shared. I'll be the first to teach the new module. I'll take the hardest base. I'll answer the hardest questions. We can fly airplanes in thunderstorms. We can fly through this, too." Derek hit send and stared at the small, brave arrow leaving his screen. Back in Dallas, Jessica typed the last slide for Session 01, De-escalation without dehumanization. Practice, breathe. Name the behavior, not the person. Offer choices that preserve dignity. Document like a pro. Ask yourself afterward, did I make anyone smaller today? She sat back. For the first time since the flight, her hands were steady. And in a quiet house on Chicago's South Side, Emma cued a new upload. Everyday Grace at 28 Gates, and whispered to her screen, "This is a story I want to go viral." Outside, somewhere above the dark, a plane crossed the night on schedule. Inside, strangers leaned back, eyes closed, trusting people they would never meet to carry them forward without making them smaller on the way. The storm after the calm had not ended, but the work had begun to hold. The weeks that followed felt like turbulence without end. The headlines hadn't cooled and the cameras hadn't turned away. Across America, people argued on news panels, podcasts, street corners. Some called Marcus Williams a hero. Others called him a corporate manipulator. The phrase Flight 2847 had entered everyday conversation. It was shorthand for bias, for justice, for reckoning inside Southwest Airlines HQ. Marcus stood in the glass elevator, rising slowly toward the executive floor, watching the employees below like a river of motion. Every day, more people stopped him to talk. Some thanked him. Some avoided eye contact. But everyone was listening now. He was on his way to a meeting that could undo everything he built. The hearing board of directors had called it an extraordinary review session. In practice, it was a tribunal. When Marcus entered the room, every seat was filled, from shareholders to peer heads, from the pilot union president to the company's general counsel. A live stream camera was set up in the back. Transparency, the press release said. Robert Jordan opened with the official tone of damage control. Thank you all for attending. Today we'll assess the implementation costs, legal exposure, and long-term viability of the Williams Initiative. Translation: will this movement bankrupt us? Marcus didn't sit. You can assess the costs, he said. I'll remind you of the value. A murmur spread. He walked to the center, tablet in hand. 3 weeks ago, he began, we were a trending hashtag. Today, customer satisfaction is up 12%. Rebooking rates rose 9%. Complaint filings dropped in half. And the public's trust, though bruised, is returning. He tapped the screen. Charts filled the display, blue lines climbing against red headlines. But that's not the point. Marcus continued. This initiative isn't a marketing plan. It's moral infrastructure. A silver-haired shareholder leaned forward. Mr. Williams, no one questions your principles. But we've already spent $6 million on retraining, legal reviews, new tech. What's the ROI on moral infrastructure? Marcus met her gaze. The ROI is a company that exists next year. The Crossferry pilot union president stood. Sir, we support the training, but morale among captains is shaky. They feel scrutinized, afraid to make any call. A pilot who hesitates can cost lives, Marcus nodded. Then we train decisiveness with empathy, not in spite of it. Courage isn't barking orders. It's having the strength to think before you act, the PR director spoke next. Public interest is fading. We can quietly roll back some of these initiatives in 6 months. Stop, Marcus said sharply. That's how rot returns, quietly, incrementally, comfortably. A low buzz of voices filled the room. Marcus took a slow breath. Let's be clear, this isn't about optics. It's about oxygen. Either this company breathes differently from now on, or it suffocates under the weight of its own denial. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Robert Jordan sighed, weary but resolute. Let the record show. The Williams Initiative proceeds. Full funding approved. Marcus nodded once. The decision was made. But battles won on paper often reignite in silence, the shadows of doubt that evening. Marcus walked through the nearly empty hangar. Mechanics were finishing a midnight maintenance check. Sparks flew, metal clanged. He felt the fatigue settle in, the exhaustion of leadership, the weight of moral clarity in a corporate world built on margins. He sat on a crate beside the maintenance bay, scrolling through messages. One email stopped him cold. Subject: anonymous complaint, bias against crew. Mr. Williams, one of your new empathy trainers humiliated a flight attendant in front of peers, accusing them of bias for mispronouncing a passenger's name. The attendant quit. We're scared to speak up, Marcus exhaled. So this is what justice looks like on the ground, he murmured. Change had become zeal. Correction had become crusade. He drafted a response. Justice without compassion becomes vengeance. Fix it immediately, quietly, kindly, he had said, rubbing his eyes. Revolution, he was learning, didn't just threaten the powerful, it could also corrupt the righteous. Jessica's test across town. Jessica Martina stood before her first full class of trainees. 30 new hires, fresh uniforms, nervous smiles. On the projector behind her glowed the title, Empathy in Action, the Flight to 1847 lesson. The moment she started speaking, whispers spread. They recognized her. You're her, right? A young man blurted. The flight attendant from the video. Jessica's throat tightened. Yes, that was me. Awkward silence. Then one woman in the back raised her hand. Why should we learn about empathy from someone who didn't have any? The words hit like a slap. But Jessica didn't flinch. Because I know what happens when you lose it, she said simply. The class fell silent again. I can't undo what I did, she continued. But I can make sure none of you ever end up in that position. Watching a stranger's humanity fade because of your fear, she showed the footage unedited, raw. Her own voice calling Marcus a fraud. His quiet composure. The shame she carried forever. When it ended, no one moved. Some were crying. Jessica said softly. Empathy starts when you stop defending your reflection and start seeing theirs. For the first time since that flight, she felt something new, not forgiveness, but purpose. Emma's returned that night. Emma Morgan uploaded a new video to her growing platform, now branded Skyline Stories. The title, Flight to 1847. 6 weeks later, she began on camera, sitting in a quiet cafe. The internet moved on, but the people didn't. Today, I visited Southwest HQ. I met the crew, the chairman, the captain. They're not villains. They're people trying to fix what broke. The video cut to footage of Jessica's class. Marcus in a town hall. Morrison talking to young pilots. Emma's narration continued. Cinematic moral drama isn't just entertainment. It's how we learn empathy, through conflict, consequence, and courage. If we can't forgive, we can't grow. The clip ended with a shot of a plane taking off into a stormy sky. Every flight carries a chance to crash or to climb. Which one depends on who we decide to be. The video hit 1 million views in a day. Morrison's moment meanwhile. Captain Derek Morrison returned to duty. It wasn't glamorous, short domestic routes, Phoenix to Albuquerque, Denver turnarounds. But it was humbling. His first flight back, the gate agent paused before boarding. "Captain, a passenger requested to speak with you, said it's important." Morrison frowned. "Who is it?" An older black woman approached, holding a boarding pass. "C2A, she said. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" Morrison asked, startled. "For showing my grandson that people can change." She smiled gently, patted his arm, and boarded. Morrison stood frozen as boarding continued. Later, during climb out, he glanced at the empty jump seat beside him and whispered, "I hope so." The backlash within 12 weeks later, during a late-night strategy session. An executive slammed his folder shut. "This has gone too far," he snapped. "We're an airline, not a morality play." Employees are scared to speak without checking whether their words are politically correct. "Marcus, you've built a culture of guilt." Marcus met his glare. "No. I've built a culture of reflection. Guilt is what you feel before you change. Accountability is what you live with after." The man snorted. "Easy for you to say. You're untouchable." Marcus leaned forward. "You think power makes me safe? You think being chairman protects me from judgment? Look around. Every move I make is dissected by millions. You call that untouchable? That's accountability. And I welcome it." The room went still. Robert Jordan finally said quietly, "He's right. The public doesn't fear mistakes. They fear cover-ups. We lead through light or not at all." Marcus nodded. "Exactly. The sky's always watching." The breaking point that night, Marcus's assistant knocked on his door. "Sir, there's a protest outside." He stepped to the window. Below, a crowd of employees held candles and signs. "Protect our pilots. Empathy, not punishment. Justice for all." Not just one. They weren't against him, not entirely. They were against the fear that had grown inside the movement. Marcus went down to the lobby. No cameras, no entourage. The moment he stepped outside, the crowd fell silent. "I hear you," he said, his voice carrying over the rain-slick pavement. "You're right to speak up. Empathy without safety isn't fair, and safety without empathy isn't human. We'll get this balance right, together." He raised a candle someone had handed him. "This isn't a protest. It's a conversation." The crowd cheered softly. Someone began singing "Lean on Me." Others joined, voices trembling but hopeful. Marcus smiled. For the first time since that flight, he felt the sky lighten again. Late reflection years later, he sat alone in his office, rain streaking the glass. On his desk lay a handwritten note from Jessica, slid under his door. "Mr. Williams, thank you for not giving up on me. You taught me that justice isn't revenge and redemption isn't automatic. It's work. I'm still working." Jessica folded it carefully, placed it in the same folder as his boarding pass from flight to A47. He looked out the window, whispering, "We're still flying through the storm. But at least now we see it." Closing image in the quiet of the Dallas night, the rain cleared. Moonlight spread across the tarmac, glinting off the wings of a departing jet. A silver bird carrying strangers toward morning. Inside, a new flight attendant rehearsed the safety script, calm, kind, steady. Behind her, a nervous trainee watched and whispered, "That's Jessica Martinez. She's the reason we even have this training." And somewhere, Marcus Williams closed his eyes and finally slept, not because the work was done, but because it had begun to work. Morning sunlight spilled across the Dallas skyline like a promise. It had been 6 months since Flight 2847, 6 months since Marcus Williams refused to leave C2A, since a single act of prejudice had unraveled an empire and rebuilt it from its bones. The world had moved on, but the echoes hadn't faded. They lived in classrooms, airports, and boardrooms, in every apology made with humility. In every pause before judgment. Southwest Airlines had become a symbol, a cautionary tale, a case study, and a second chance. The anniversary conference at the Phoenix Convention Center. Thousands gathered for the first National Aviation Ethics Summit, hosted by Southwest, sponsored by the Department of Transportation, the FAA, and the NAACP. Banners hung from the rafters reading, "One flight changed everything." Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed. On stage, a giant screen displayed the familiar footage of Flight to 847, Marcus seated calmly, Jessica trembling, Morrison issuing the removal order. When the video ended, the audience sat in silence. Then Marcus took the stage. He looked older, steadier. His voice carried not just power, but peace. 6 months ago, he began. "We learned how quickly perception can turn into persecution. But we also learned how quickly humility can turn into healing." Applause rippled through the room. He continued, the Williams Protocol is now active in 5 major airlines. FAA Regulation 22.8, the Passenger Dignity Act, was passed last month, and our industry has seen a 71% reduction in discrimination complaints. The crowd erupted. But, Marcus said, lifting a hand, those numbers aren't our victory. They're our reminder that every percentage point represents someone's pain. That didn't have to happen, his voice softened. Let's never forget why this started, not because of one man's anger, but because of one woman's assumption and one company's silence. And because together we decided to face it instead of hide it from the front row. Jessica Martinez wiped tears, hands folded tightly in her lap. Behind her, Captain Derek Morrison sat in his uniform again, not as a symbol of authority, but of redemption. The flight that followed 2 days later. Marcus boarded Flight 902 from Dallas to Los Angeles. He always preferred to fly commercial, even now. Not as the chairman. As a man still learning to trust the sky again. Jessica greeted him at the door. No longer trembling, no longer ashamed. Her uniform was pressed, her eyes bright. Good afternoon, Mr. Williams. Seat to A, as always? He smiled. Habits hard to break. They shared a quiet moment that held the entire arc of their story. The humiliation, the forgiveness, the grace. Welcome aboard, she said, voice steady. He leaned closer. You've come a long way, Jessica. So have you, she replied when the plane lifted off. The passengers clapped softly. Some recognized them, a quiet acknowledgement that this wasn't just another flight. It was history, rewritten in real time. Emma's documentary across the country. In a dim editing studio in Chicago, Emma Morgan was finishing her most ambitious project yet, a full-length documentary titled C2A. The flight that changed the skies. Clips interwove Jessica's training sessions, Morrison's speeches to new pilots, Marcus testifying before Congress over it all. Emma's calm narration. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It sits quietly in a window seat, waiting to be recognized. Sometimes courage isn't confrontation. It's composure. In one emotional sequence, Jessica stood in front of new recruits and said, when you forget someone's humanity, you risk your own. The screen faded to black. Then showed text, dedicated to every passenger who was ever told they didn't belong. When the documentary premiered online, it broke records, 20 million views in its first week, translated into 12 languages, screened at universities and training centers worldwide. Emma refused sponsorships, saying simply, some stories shouldn't be owned. They should be shared. Morrison's redemption. Captain Derek Morrison stood in the Denver Training Center, before a room full of young pilots. His voice was steady but humble. You all know my story, he began. And if you don't, you can Google it. A nervous chuckle rippled through the class. I made a call 6 months ago that could have ruined a life and nearly did. Not because I hated anyone. Because I stopped questioning my instincts. Because I confused authority with wisdom. He paused, letting that sink in. Today, every captain in this company trains under the Williams Protocol. It doesn't make you weaker. It makes you wiser. Because hesitation isn't fear. It's awareness. He took off his pilot's hat and set it on the table. This job isn't about being right. It's about being responsible. For every soul on board and everyone you might misjudge. When he finished, the class stood to applaud. For once, Derek didn't look haunted. He looked free. The boardroom shift back in Dallas. The boardroom that once served as battleground now felt different. Posters of empathy and action lined the walls. HR reports showed record employee retention and satisfaction. Robert Jordan handed Marcus a report. Our quarterly numbers came in. We recovered everything we lost. And then some. Marcus smiled faintly. Funny how decency turns out to be good business. Jordan leaned back. You realize you've redefined this company's identity. Marcus looked out the window at the hangars bathed in sunlight. Not me, us. We're not the airline that made a mistake. We're the airline that admitted it. Jessica's full circle that evening. Jessica arrived at the Dallas Training Auditorium, now renamed the Dignity Hall. On the stage was a plaque, in honor of Flight to 847. A lesson in humanity. She stood at the podium, looking out at the new class of recruits. You don't work for an airline, she said. You work for every passenger who ever believed travel could change their life. You carry stories, not just bags. She looked toward the back of the room. Marcus stood there quietly, arms folded. He gave her a small nod, silent approval. Afterward, he joined her backstage. You've become quite the teacher. She laughed softly. You made me one. He handed her a small box. Inside was a silver pin shaped like a pair of wings, engraved with the words Flight 2847. Jessica's breath caught. Is this official? Not yet, Marcus said. But it will be. Every employee who completes the empathy program will wear it. Not as a badge of perfection, But as proof of growth, tears filled her eyes. "You really believe people can change, don't you?" Marcus smiled. "I've seen it." The global ripple. Months later, other airlines followed suit. Delta, United, JetBlue, Alaska, all adopted versions of the Williams Protocol. The International Air Transport Association IATA introduced a global charter inspired by it, and beyond aviation. It spread to cruise lines, hotels, and public institutions. Dignity training became the new standard. The FAA even cited the program in their safety handbook, a quiet acknowledgement that emotional safety mattered. To Dop, Marcus often said in interviews, "It started with one seat, one assumption, one recording. But the lesson belonged to everyone." Marcus at home late one night. Marcus sat in his home office, scrolling through messages from around the world, letters from passengers, students, even pilots. One email stood out. The subject line read, "Because of you, dear Mr. Williams, I'm writing from Johannesburg. I watched your story online. Last week, I stopped my coworker from humiliating a customer because of how they looked. I remembered your calm, your question, your courage. You made me realize silence is complicity. Thank you for teaching me to speak." Linda. When Marcus leaned back in his chair, tears pricking his eyes, he whispered to himself, "That's the Roy." His phone buzzed, a text from Emma. The documentary hit 25 million views. "Netflix wants it. Should we?" Marcus replied, "Only if it stays free on YouTube." He set the phone down, smiled faintly, and turned off his lamp. The night outside was full of stars, distant, constant, honest. The reunion flight 6 months later. On the 1-year anniversary of Flight 2847, the crew reunited for a commemorative flight. Same route, Dallas to Phoenix. Jessica in uniform, Morrison in the cockpit, Emma filming discreetly, and Marcus, seat to A. Of course, before takeoff, Morrison made an announcement over the PA system. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. You might notice something special about today's flight. 1 year ago, this route reminded us all that dignity is non-negotiable. Today, we fly in honor of that lesson and of the courage it took to face it." Applause filled the cabin. As they ascended through a wash of golden clouds, Jessica walked down the aisle, stopping beside Marcus's seat. "Still checking your watch?" she teased softly. He smiled. "Not anymore. I'm not waiting for justice this time. I'm flying with it." The closing speech. When the plane landed in Phoenix, a small crowd greeted them: media, employees, families. Marcus stepped out first, facing the cameras one last time. "Flight 2847 began as a scandal," he said, "but it ended as a story about power, humility, and change. I hope the next time someone looks at a passenger, they don't see color, class, or status. They see a human being just trying to get home." He smiled. "And that's all any of us are ever doing, trying to get home. One flight at a time." Epilogue. A month later, the final frame of Emma's documentary faded in. Marcus walking down a jet bridge, his briefcase in hand, his reflection doubling in the window beside him. Her narration closed the film. Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wears a boarding pass. Dignity doesn't always arrive on time, but it always lands where it's needed most. And every flight, every story, every act of courage reminds us the skies belong to everyone. The credits rolled over footage of planes taking off at sunrise, their contrails crossing like threads of redemption across a boundless sky.